Alright guys, I originally intended to do a video about the details of the engine, and really, there's a lot of little things to it. I think once it's all done, I will do an entire spec out, and I will do a video, and I will put it on paper, and I will type it instead of talking about it, because I kill a lot of time talking. There's a lot of things, and really, if I put it in video form, you guys can pause it and read each page that I write out. So I'm going to type it out, crop it, and put it on there and whatever. And I'll figure that out when we get to it. Or if not, I'll just fucking endlessly bore you guys to death by talking like I am now. So I came out here last night and I got the timing cover on, the oil pan on. I know, yawn, nothing major. Nothing cool like the green camshafts and valve springs, but really we are on the tail end of this build. I do have a water pump for it. It's an aluminum water pump. I thought it was a flow cooler, but so, all right. So little fact here. We're gonna go ahead and make our own version of the flow cooler water pump, right? So the flow cooler water pumps, literally all they have is a flat plate that rivets onto this impeller. And what I'm going to do instead is I have a hole saw. I'm going to get a hole saw that is this big, cut out a piece of sheet metal, and I'm going to go ahead and tack weld it onto the fins. And maybe pop a rivet in there just for safety, because the last thing you want is for that thing to be fucking bouncing around in there. But essentially, that's the unique part of the flow cooler, is they pretty much mimicked, I forgot what car it was. God damn it, I just dropped the bolt. Here we go. But there was a certain water pump that Olds had that was really, really good. And the face of it was flat and the impellers were on the back side. And that's pretty much what the flow cooler pumps are. There's nothing real fancy to them. So we're going to go ahead and try to recreate that, because I got this water pump for free. And I have a few here I can play with to actually dial it in before I go ahead and put it on this nice one we got. I did clean up a bunch of bolts and stuff the other day when I signed off. There is a concern issue, and at this point I'm chalking it up to like an ounce of prevention saves a pound of headache. So I'm going to end up removing this plug all over again. Now, under normal conventional service procedures, you would have to get creative or remove the camshaft to remove this. I have done this before with actually this plug, where I actually welded, on this one I actually welded a bolt, and I grabbed my slide hammer with the forks and yanked it out. And when I say slide hammer, I'm using a body slide hammer, not an axle puller. Those things have no weight. I'm talking about a Morgan knocker. It is a 10 to 15 pound weight. It does not compare to your conventional slide hammer that you would go buy at Napa for pulling axles. So on this one, what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to go ahead and weld a flanged nut, and then go ahead and screw a bolt into it and grab my fork attachment for my body hammer, slide hammer, pull the plug out, put in a new one, because I'm not happy with that one. I think I drove it in a little bit too far. And the reason with that is, like, so if you guys remember, we reused that one. And it went in fine. It went in nice and tight. But the problem is I punched it in the first time. I got it settled in. I squared it up. And then I tapped it in once more. And, like, that was it, man. It went, like, in. So it might have something to do with the fact that it was reused. Who the fuck knows? It's probably it. But it went in a little easier than it should have. And I'm not happy about that. This area doesn't see like any pressure, like coolant pressure. So, yeah, I reused it. I put RTV on it, and like that was it, It should have sealed up fine, but I think I don't want, my biggest fear is that it's going to be riding on the end of the camshaft, and that's no good. Even though that area sees oil, because that cam bearing gets fed oil, and it oozes out of the bearing, it would see oil, but I'm still not entirely happy with that. And at this point, it's an easy fix. We know what we need to do. When I get it on the run stand, because I'm not going to put on the flex plate until it's on the run stand. So then at this point, I'm going to When it's on the run stand, I'm going to take care of that, have my plug ready to go. I'm going to order the Mylodon kit, which has a variety of plugs, and it should have the correct one. Or I'll just order the correct one, the single one, and order a pack of 5, which usually you can't order just one. You end up buying like a baggie of them. I have my distributor just in there for now. Obviously, nowhere near where it needs to be, but it's just in there to protect things. The oil pump rod is in. We had no real issues putting it in. A little bit of unprofessionalism on my part. I should know better. I didn't have the installer for the balancer, but I really wanted to get it in, so I coated it with oil. I tapped it in a little bit with the rubber mallet. No hard blows. I know people say if you pound them in, you beat up the thrust surface, but I think the thrust surface sees way more pressure on acceleration than I did with a rubber mallet. I just had to tap it in lightly to the point where I can get a bolt in there with a washer and drive it in. It's not actually bolted in because the correct washer that I need is a little bit bigger. The one I have is a little bit bigger than the opening here. So I have to go out and get a hardened washer, which I've done before at the hardware store for this application. I'm going to go get a washer and just torque down the bolt and we're good. The washer that I used was a little too thin to actually hold torque, but it was thin enough or thick enough to work to install the balancer, just not for its actual intended purpose. So valve covers are installed. They're beat up, but they're beautiful. I mean, this engine's so ugly that it's beautiful, and I'm not going to fucking paint it. It's going to stay this way because I don't know. I'm crazy. This is the only one I'm not going to paint. So I also have already glued my intake gaskets in place. So I'm going to go ahead and remove these bolts that I had on here to locate the gasket. So you can see our gasket isn't falling down. It's not moving. It's in the correct spot. And it pretty much matches up with our ports. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and dab RTV here, 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 and here on both sides of the gasket. Let the intake dry on there. And then once I know that it's set up overnight, I'm going to go ahead underneath the side on the cylinder head. I'm going to grab a hobby knife and cut out the little dab of RTV that I put on each corner. And then that way, the pattern, the gasket will be laying on the intake as I need it. I can scribe the opening or paint it and know exactly how much material I need to remove to match the gasket. And again, in our application, a little bit of a port misalignment isn't going to be the end of the world. This has been told to me by many guys where they're like, if you have a little bit of a port misalignment, it's not going to be the end of the world in this type of application for your horsepower level. You're not going to see a significant amount of loss. So really, that's kind of where we're at. I came out here to glue the intake down. I figured I would touch on that because, again, things are overlapping here, and I want to make sure I get this stuff for you guys. We got a bunch of new subscribers. Thank you guys for following along. A lot of comments lately. I try to answer as much of your questions and details. The reason why I mentioned the specs is because somebody asked about it, and I will make a dedicated video for the specs on this setup, just like I did for that setup. So we'll get to that when we get to that point. But in the next week or two, I have to get that intake knocked out. And there's still a possibility that I may have the intake O-ringed for a better fit altogether. And we'll go from there. So we'll let you guys go. Share, like, subscribe. Follow me on Instagram as Copper Cutlass. That's kind of it for today and Sunday's work. So we will see you then.